All right, let's talk about learning for real. Today, we're going to throw out all those old study habits and get into the actual science of how you can learn pretty much anything and make it stick.
So, I have to start with a bit of a confession. For years, maybe decades, I was convinced I was a visual learner. You know the type. I'd sit down with the textbook and my favorite highlighter, and I would just paint those pages neon yellow. And you know what? It felt so productive. I felt like I was literally absorbing the knowledge through the color. Turns out, I was completely wrong.
And it wasn't just me. The science is pretty clear on this. That whole idea of learning styles, that you're either a visual, auditory, or kinesthetic learner, it's basically a myth. As neuroscientist Dr. Andrew Huberman explains, for all intents and purposes, they just don't exist. So what was actually happening in my brain during all those hours of highlighting? Well, I was falling into a classic trap, something called the illusion of competence. See, when you passively reread or highlight something, the material starts to feel really familiar. But that feeling is a total trick. You're not actually wiring that information into your brain.
And this really gets to the heart of it. What highlighting does, is it trains you for recognition. It's that easy, comfortable feeling of, oh yeah, I've seen that before. But real learning, the kind that sticks, requires recall. That's the hard work. That's actively pulling information out of your head with no clues. One feels good, the other is how you actually learn.
So, okay, if our old methods are built on a myth, how in the world does our brain actually learn? What's physically happening up there when we try to cram in new information?
Well, the answer is this incredible process that our brains are capable of called neuroplasticity. This is it. This is the engine behind every single thing you have ever learned in your entire life. To put it simply, neuroplasticity is just your brain's amazing ability to reorganize itself, to form new pathways and connections based on your experiences. Every thought you have, every skill you practice, it physically changes the structure of your brain. It's wild. Now, this change happens in basically three ways. One, you can strengthen the links between the brain cells you already have. Two, you can weaken those links. And three, you can actually add brand new neurons, which is a process called neurogenesis. But here's the part that blows my mind. That last one, neurogenesis, adding new brain cells, it gets all the headlines, but it turns out it's responsible for a tiny, almost trivial amount of the learning we do as adults. Almost everything you learn happens by rewiring the brain you've already got.
And this leads to this super interesting paradox. We always think of learning as adding new stuff, right? But it's just as much about subtracting, about removing the wrong connections. Just think of a little kid learning to eat with a spoon. At first, their movements are all over the place. They get better not just by strengthening the right moves, but by literally pruning away and weakening all the wrong, clumsy neural pathways. Learning is cleaning house. Okay, so once you understand that learning is all about this physical rewiring, it forces a huge shift in how you think about studying. We've been looking at it completely backwards. The goal is not what we think it is.
And this right here is the key takeaway. Dr. Huberman puts it so perfectly. The real goal of studying isn't to cram information in. The goal is to stop that information from leaking out. We are not just learning, we are actively fighting against the brain's natural tendency to forget. That's right, forgetting is not a flaw, it's a feature. Think about it, your brain is hit with millions of pieces of data every single day. It has to have a system to decide what's junk and what's important. Forgetting is its default setting to save energy. So our job when we learn is to send a huge flashing neon sign to our brain that says, no, not this. This is important. Keep this one. So we know the enemy is forgetting. We know the battle is all about neuroplasticity. But how do we actually send that this is important signal? Well, luckily, there's a really simple science-backed protocol we can all use. In fact, let's try it right now. Quick quiz. Don't stress. No one's grading you. Just try to answer this in your head. How many main ways does neuroplasticity work? How many mechanisms did we just talk about? The answer is 3. Strengthening, weakening, and neurogenesis. But here's the thing. It honestly doesn't matter if you got it right or wrong. The magic is in what just happened in your brain when you tried to come up with the answer. The reason we just did that little quiz is because the act of testing yourself is the single most powerful tool we have to fight that forgetting curve. When you force yourself to try and retrieve information, especially when it's a little bit of a struggle, your brain releases neurochemicals that basically put a giant save sticker on that memory. That struggle is the signal. So the protocol is incredibly simple.
First, you take in some new material. Read a chapter, watch a video, whatever. Then, and this is the most important part, you stop. You close the book, you pause the video, and then you quiz yourself. You ask, okay, what were the key ideas there? What were those 3 things again? You force your brain to do the work.
And this all leads us to the final and maybe the most important lesson of all. It really requires us to change our entire relationship with what learning is supposed to feel like.
Here's the hard truth, and it's so counterintuitive. If you're studying and it feels easy, if you're comfortable and just kind of flowing through it, you are probably not learning very much. Real, deep learning, the kind that builds those strong connections, it often feels frustrating. It feels hard. It feels like a struggle. And that's because the friction is the growth. The struggle is the entire point. That feeling of effort is what forges the connections. The difficulty is the biological signal that tells your brain to physically change. We're always looking for the easy way, the hack. But it turns out the biology of our brains dictates that the harder path is the only one that truly works. So I'll leave you with this one question. The next time you sit down to learn something new, ask yourself, are you just passively trying to memorize things? Or are you actively, and yes, maybe even frustratingly, studying to fight the process of forgetting? Because that choice right there, that changes everything.